Thank you all for joining us. My name is Heather Miller Rubens. I am the Executive Director and the Roman Catholic Scholar at the Institute for Islamic, Christian, and Jewish Studies, and we are thrilled to have you with us this evening. I'll be co-teaching with my colleague, Dr. Zeyneb Sayilgan, who is the Muslim scholar at ICJS. And we are thrilled as an organization to be participating in the Maryland Humanities Council's One Book, One Maryland program, discussing this year's selection, The Book of Delights by Ross Gay, with you all. So I'm going to talk about the sort of plan for the evening so that you know what we're doing. So welcome. This is where we are right now. We're going to start off, Zeyneb and I, by talking about kind of what does it mean to have an interreligious conversation about this book in particular. And then we're going to share from our own respective religious traditions and our own respective areas of expertise. What does it mean to think about practices of delight, developing delight muscles from a Muslim perspective and a Roman Catholic perspective? And we're going to then read some of our favorite essays from the collection and talk about them briefly. And then we're going to flex our own delight muscles and share something that has caused us joy in recent days. So that'll bring us to about 8 o'clock. And then we're going to invite you all in to have small group conversation with each other. And we'll conclude about 8:30. So that's the plan for the program. All right, so building delight muscles, an interreligious conversation. I think when we first sort of picked this up as a book, people were saying, well, why should the ICJS have a book discussion around this book? Does this book have anything to do with religion? Kind of, are you surprised to be here? And one of the things that struck both Zeyneb and I was that this book, I think, is very much part of a larger discourse about paying attention in this moment, about mindfulness, about being a contemplative in the world. And that there's a sort of larger movement of mindfulness practices and meditation practices that are coming out of both religious perspectives as well as more secular perspectives. And that because of those practices, this is actually a wonderful conversation for folks to have who may be doing this work out of a religious framework or out of a non-religious framework. The other thing that really struck us was that this is a sort of a practice of cultivating gratitude. And developing what does it mean to sort of live with an orientation of finding joy and being grateful towards the life that you have, and sort of how do you actually establish that habit, right? And I feel like that sense of practice, that sense of discipline that Ross Gay talks about and that we talked about in preparation for this evening is something that we're going to keep going back to again and again. Zeyneb, did you want to sort of elaborate a little bit more about the kind of why this book and why ICJS?
Thanks, Heather. I think you explained it so well. I think I had the same feelings that it really invites us to be more attentive and more mindful. And, we are always drawn into the macro events. And I think with this book, it was such a beautiful invitation to be more focused on the micro things that really nurture us throughout the day and really pay close attention. So I think it's very easy to always look at the larger scale of things that are going on. Our news feeds are constantly feeding us with the big negative news, and here there was really a call to, okay, let's focus on our microcosmos and find the joy in our daily delights, which I personally I'm very passionate and keen to do.
That's a lovely thing to kind of build off of. I think that the context for this evening's program needs to be acknowledged, that we're still in the middle of a global pandemic, that there's a lot of stress in our own personal lives and professional lives, a lot of uncertainty, and like you said, in the news cycle, just a lot of a sense of hopelessness. And so that's why I think also talking about where and how one can find delight in one's life is actually kind of a gift, particularly in this moment. So one thing I think we want to talk about is sort of how we sort of build delight muscles in our respective traditions. And so Zeyneb, I was wondering if you could talk with our audience tonight about sort of building Muslim delight muscles and sort of what are Muslim practices of gratitude and prayer.
Sure. When I was reading this book, as a Muslim person, as a person of faith, I came to this, and it really resonated with me because so many times in the Quran, which is for Muslims the central scripture, there's always the invitation to be attentive and to be mindful of the so-called signs of God, and to be, to ask healthy questions about things around you, about the events and the things that surround you. And just like many of you, I enjoy nature walks. That's where I feel personally always very nourished, and I pay a lot of attention when I walk. And so there was a recent shot that I took, this picture that I posted here. It's a leaf, and we all enjoy the colorful fall season right now, and it just like invited me for deeper reflection. I looked at it, at the colors, at the shape, and the Quran talks about that everything, every being is pointing to the divine, to the creator, and is a sign of God, displaying his beauty and compassion, his artistry. And what really gave me delight in looking at this leaf was just the amount of attention that was given to it. You see like the channels that go into every corner of the leaf, and that there are veins created that nourish every little piece of the leaf with water, and there is a shape, a design. It's a piece of artistry. The colors are wonderfully selected. So that gave me a lot of joy and delight. So I'm then overwhelmed with this sense of happiness, really. So really paying close attention is a very deep Islamic practice, and it's no coincidence that many saints and pious people have spent significant amount of time in nature, because there is this connection that people feel with other created beings. And so one beautiful prayer that I always remind myself is one that Prophet Muhammad always said, basically increase my sense of awe and wonder, because oftentimes we take things around us as ordinary, as just things are there and they have no meaning. But everything is just really so awesome, really. I mean, like the word itself says, it's full of awe, and it's our ability to cultivate that outlook, that positive outlook. So when I was looking at this leaf, I also made the connection with my own life. The being that had invested so much time in creating the leaf, thought about it, and I also felt, okay, if somebody pays so much attention and invests so much detail and artistry in this piece, then I, as a human being, I'm also certainly not neglected, and that God shows up in my life also in such a deep way. And so one of the things that I also do, especially in my family, I just look at the dinner table, at the breakfast table, and oftentimes I read with my kids where the products are coming from, and then discover that the pickles are from India, my coffee comes from Honduras, and the taste and the flavor and everything is just really so delightful. And also being aware that all of that comes from different corners of the world, but that also people have been endowed with the skills and abilities to grow this fruit that then has then been provided to me, and that gives me a lot of joy and delight, and I'm overcome with this sense of gratitude, which then leads me, of course, to prayer. I think one of the things that I found somehow a little bit missing in the book, even though I appreciate it a lot, was, okay, I'm now overjoyed and I feel this delight, but I want to express my gratitude to whom? Like there's somebody, somebody is thinking hard about my needs and desires, the things that give me joy and provides the sustenance and all these nourishment that my body and my emotions need and all of that. And so for Muslims, then it's the ultimate expression of gratitude is prayer. I try to express my delight and my gratitude in prayer. And I found that especially the 5 times daily prayer is a healthy disruption to slow down. And it's not easy because it's challenging to carve out space and time, but then take a moment and be fully present to offer that gratitude that you have encountered during the day. I feel is a very meaningful practice. So you see, especially in in the Muslim vocabulary, people often say Alhamdulillah, all praise and thanks be to God, because whatever they encounter in sickness and in health, in fear and safety, in joy and sadness, there's always things that we can find delight in and always be grateful for. And so that is somehow embedded in the religious or the daily vocabulary of Muslims. When people ask you, how are you doing? Despite the challenges I face, I say, yes, Alhamdulillah, I'm really grateful that for so many things that I should not take for granted. And I know in your own tradition, Heather, there are, I'm sure, many examples of cultivating, delight and spiritual exercise that help you to cultivate that sense of joy. Would you like to share a little bit?
Yes, thank you so much. For also, I did not realize that you were actually the person who took the photo of the leaf when we had I had thought that you had sort of found that on the internet. So even the small moment of delight in the program itself, that the fact that you took that picture, I'm very pleased by that.
And I wanted to share it with you. And I actually shared it with many friends who then also connected and shared in that joy. So I think it's something that we, that is a share. When joy is shared, also it increases. That I also found is another beautiful aspect of it.
Oh, and we did you want to talk about the terms that you used and explain those a little bit more?
Yeah, as I just noted, that was just people, when they think of Islam and Muslims, oftentimes you see people in a congregation praying. And for me, again, this is just what I said, trying to carve out space and time in your daily life for prayer, which is the ultimate expression of gratitude. And I think it's related with this whole notion of mindfulness, that you slow down and take a moment to reflect and rejuvenate your mind and body and heart and spirit to offer gratitude. I felt when I experienced delight, then I know, I'm aware this is something extraordinary, but it has been given, and to acknowledge that source, I feel that's where prayer then comes in, because and gratitude, as you said, it's something that you need to cultivate. It does not come easy. And from a Muslim perspective, ingratitude is very easy. We tend to be complain about things and have sometimes a scarcity mindset where we think of the things that we don't have. And so the Quran reminds people that actually we tend to be ungrateful most of the time. Well, it's not on our radar, but there are so many things that people can be grateful about. And so for me, it's really a lifelong journey to cultivate a sense of joy and positive outlook on life.
Thank you. Thank you for walking us through those terms again. I want to share sort of a Roman Catholic perspective now, and say that I did my undergraduate education at Georgetown University, and so became introduced to Ignatian spirituality as an undergrad. St. Ignatius Loyola, if you are not familiar with him, was born in 1491, dies in 1556, is one of the founders of the Society of Jesus, which is also known as the Jesuits. Pope Francis, the current Pope of the Catholic Church, is a Jesuit priest, which is unusual and exciting as far as the history of the pontificate goes. And one of the things that St. Ignatius left both to the members of his order, but then also really importantly to the broader world. And he was very conscious of this as something that he was trying to offer to folks who may not be in a monastic order or taking vows, right? Sort of folks like you and me who are sort of doing things in daily life. And he created the spiritual exercises. And one of the things that I just sort of occurred to me when we were preparing for this is, right, we're building delight muscles and we're doing spiritual exercises, right? And so there's a way in which there's a lot of like embodied language in what we're talking about here, that this sort of radically paying attention, sort of developing a contemplative mindset isn't something that just happens sort of internally, that it requires a discipline, and that discipline is of both the body and the soul and the mind. And so that sort of embodied nature, I think, just jumped out at me in a new way as we sort of talked again about building muscles and doing our exercises. So the spiritual exercises, and you can go to a lovely website called Ignatian Spirituality and sort of look for more resources there if you're curious about that. The spiritual exercises in their sort of ideal form are meant to happen in a kind of extended silent retreat. Ideally, it's a 30-day silent retreat. Recognizing that most of us do not have the time or the capacity to go away for 30 days at a point in time. There are other sort of smaller parts of this that are kind of under the umbrella of kind of a retreat in daily life. But even there, you can do kind of a more intense version of the spiritual exercises with a spiritual director over sort of a 6-month or a 9-month period where you're really trying to do this about 45 minutes to an hour every day. And so there's a realization that there are seasons in your life when maybe you need to do that, when maybe you need to kind of reboot, when you need to, have that New Year's resolution. And part of that resolution is being more mindful, recognizing and cultivating gratitude in your life. And so you can do that. I want to share with everyone tonight, not the 30-day silent retreat, not the sort of 9-month kind of intense boot camp, but really the daily examine, which I think is a lovely framework, particularly when thinking about Ross Gay. So there are kind of 5 steps to the daily examine that Ignatius of Loyola pointed out, that you first want to become aware of God's presence. So there's a sort of a stopping, a setting yourself up for a moment of prayerfulness. Then you actually have to go through your day and you're reviewing your day with gratitude. And while you're reviewing your day, you're supposed to pay very close attention to your emotions. Where are you being called? What do you desire? Where are things hard? And then after you kind of do that review where you're paying attention to how you're responding to the world around you and how you're responding to yourself, then you sort of choose one part of that day and you pray from it. And importantly, you look forward to tomorrow. So sort of when you're done with the discipline, there's a sense of moving forward. There's a kind of a sort of American Jesuit joke that, before Pope Francis became the Pope, that maybe the most famous Jesuit in America was Jim Martin. And, I think that maybe still stands. And I wanted to share, he has a lovely interview. It's several years old now with Krista Tippett and On Being, where he sort of talks about being a Jesuit and sort of really talks about what it means to do the examine, what it means to actually practice Ignatian spirituality. So if you're a podcast person, there's a great episode for you to listen to. The other sort of thing I want to highlight for this, again, a series of delight, is when I was looking for an image of St. Ignatius to put in the slide deck, I was so pleased to see one by Peter Paul Rubens, who you'll notice spells his last name the same way I spell my last name. And usually this is a very unusual spelling, only the one E. And so if there's an opportunity to highlight the work of Peter Paul Rubens, I find a delight in doing so. And this was a wonderful opportunity to do just that. So again, if you're interested in sort of how Catholics can do this on a small scale, the examine's a really great place to start. And if you feel so called to do a silent retreat, I will pray for you and hope that you are successful in doing that. So at this point in the evening, we are going to move into the text. And Zeyneb, I want to go back to you and have you talk about one of the essays, or the essayettes, as Ross Gay sometimes calls them, that spoke to you in particular.
Yeah, I felt there was this moment of bewilderment when I came to essay 5 and I was reading the story of Werther's Hardyman, because I was like, what is this story doing in this book of delights? And he did not offer any more explanation. He only shared this very, I mean, it's a tragedy really, and about, this African American man who experienced really one of the, again, tragedies that we can imagine. And I'm going to read a portion from this that I also posted here on the slide. So, hole in the head. I learned today, watching the trailer for that documentary and with some subsequent online research, that when Hardyman was a boy in the 1920s, he was one of a group of little children, little test subjects, upon whom radiation experiments were performed. The experiments exposed these little children, little test subjects, to severe levels of radiation, such that for little 5-year-old Hardyman, it burned a hole in his head. It might sound harsh to say it, but good Lord, Black people never let an official-looking white person dressed in a white lab coat experiment on you or your children. Good Lord. So, my immediate impulse was, I need to know more about this person, about Werther's Hardyman. So I went, just like Ross Gay, Googled on YouTube. I mean, I looked at the trailer, at the documentary. And again, as I said, there was not much explanation why he's including the story in his book. And I felt, for me, it was an invitation to try to find the delight or the joy in this experience of deep suffering and tragedy and pain. And so and I think that's what really the exercise was about for me, that I went there and I listened to this man, I listened to Werther's Hardyman and how he shared his story, and I was just in awe of him, because he was the power of his human spirit, has his resilience and his whole attitude, just really, again, to use the title here, just gave me so much delight. I was in awe of how he responded to the tragedy, how he felt overjoyed to be able to share his narrative and his experience and his story, and that he freed himself of anger towards the people who have made him suffer for as a young child, and how much he endured since. So I felt, for me, okay, how do we find joy in the midst of suffering, in the midst of so much pain? And I think that is the greatest challenge as human beings, that it's maybe easier for us to express gratitude and joy when things are easy, but how do you deal with a situation where, especially in the midst of the pandemic, as you said, where we experience so much pain and tragedy? And here was this example of this African American man who went through great struggles, and yet he came out of it, and you stand by, and you're just in awe, really. That's how I felt. So for me, it was really the beauty of human resilience, the power of his human spirit, and how he was able to share his story, and that really left me in awe. And so I thought, if he can do that, then I can hopefully also have that potential to find joy and delight even in the midst of deep suffering. It was very profound to me, and I invite everybody to go and watch the documentary. I think you'll find it empowering as well. What was one of the essays that you found really stood out for you, Heather, in the book?
Thank you for sharing that, and for also just sort of contextualizing that in that really important way, Zeynep. So I really was drawn to essay number 71, which can be found if you've got your book nearby at home on page 187. And it's such a short essay. I think I'm just going to read it out loud. And you'll see I've collected some of the images that will hopefully bring the essay to life in a different way. So it's called Flowers in the Hands of Statues. As I have noted in a previous delight, undelightfully, it is common to see public statues in our country carrying guns. Statues of men adorned with guns. Statues of white men adorned with guns. You will probably notice this in public squares often, and near city halls and courthouses, which is an unambiguous assertion of cultural values, lest that slip by. All of which amplifies or magnifies my delight today when passing the Hoagie Carmichael statue on campus, where he's leaning over his piano, almost embracing it, maybe working out the chords of Stardust or Heart and Soul, his hat tilted back on his head, his outstretched hand atop the piano is open just enough for a flower or some flowers to fit into it, which someone or some ones have decided they should. These same ones have slid a big explosive allium. I'm not a gardener, so you'll accuse my butchery of proper flower names. Probably pilfered from a nearby drift into his soft fist. The allium is such a fortuitous flower for many reasons, but in this case, because it looks like a wand or some other magical and pointedly non-martial baton. There was also another flower I don't know the name of, though it is made of a torrent of petite violet bells. And the third flower, also unknown to me, was yellow, which made me realize that this collaborative effort was endowing Hoagie not only with a wand-centric bouquet, but with a beautifully composed one, with complementary shapes and colors. Seeing this, I was reminded of how often, in fact, we have the impulse to adorn our statues, our public figures, with flowers, and sometimes coins or fruit. I have never seen a public statue adorned with a gun, not by the sculptor, which is probably to say not at the behest of the commissioner, who is wealthy, benefits in some very short-sighted way by the union of public figures and weapons, no doubt. I suspect the statue adorning impulse, whether or not we know who the public figure is evidence, more evidence, that our inclination, our nature, is to communicate the beautiful and the fragrant however we can, to make of the world a bouquet or a vase. So what struck me about this essay, and I did the same thing Zeynep did, I was like, well, I really want to see. I've never been to Bloomington, to Indiana's campus, and so I really want to see what the statue looks like. And I was thrilled to find multiple photos of the statue with different flower arrangements. So clearly this is not just a one-time thing that Ross Gay observed, but something that regularly happens. And I was particularly tickled by the one where there is not only a flower, but also someone put a mask on Hoagie Carmichael to kind of mark the current moment. So it's a very dated photo for future historians. But it really got me thinking about my childhood and my experience in Catholic school, and in particular Catholic elementary school, where all the little girls in the elementary school that I went to were part of this society called the Children of Mary. And every May we had a crowning of Mary, where one person, usually an 8th grader, had the honor bestowed upon her of taking a beautiful wreath of flowers, and after some prayers and some ceremony, crowning the statue of Mary as sort of a part of a ritual and a devotion. And this is very much a memory that I hadn't thought of in a really long time, that this essay sort of prompted in me. And then it just made me think about how honoring statues and engaging with statues with flowers is, again, one of those moments that happens in both kind of a secular space, but also a religious space, and is a wonderful interreligious point for conversation. And so that's kind of what I wanted to bring and share with our audience here this evening. I also, my other sort of part of this, in addition to the crowning of Mary ceremony, is the fact that we often bring flowers as a memorial, as a recognition to honor our dead. And that can happen as sort of a laying of wreaths at various, again, public or ceremonial places, but also when one visits a loved one in a cemetery, that the bringing of flowers to sort of honor, recognize, to engage with sort of statues or monuments or memorials in that way is actually a practice that we do quite a lot. And I very much appreciated Ross Gay sort of allowing me to think about that for a few minutes. So I think we have reached the point where we've kind of talked about a couple of essays. Well, we were going to talk about, I think, two more, and then maybe continue what we've been doing, I think, throughout the evening, which is sharing our own sort of moments of delight. And so, Zeyneb, I was wondering if you could highlight another essay and share more.
Yeah, thank you, Heather. I feel like throughout the book, you always, listening to some of the interviews that he gave, I think there's always a temptation to be drawn to the macro events. And the past few years have been really painful, the Black Lives Matter movement and Me Too and all the things that are going on, the pandemic. So I feel like I'm always particularly interested how he wrestles with the issues, but he always forces himself, as he said, to come back to the micro and really focus on the little things that surround him. But in this essay, again, in number eight, the essay called "The Greeting," he talks about how important it is to him when Black people greet each other, even Black people who don't know each other, as they are strangers, they see each other on the street, but they greet each other. It's like what he calls the greeting, and it particularly resonated with me because of a similar experience that I have as a Muslim woman in America, also visibly identifiable as a Muslim because of my scarf. But he says here, and I'm going to read this out loud. So if you are Black in this country, you are presumed guilty. Or to come back to Abdel, who is a school teacher and thinks a lot about children, you are not allowed to be innocent. The eyes and heart of a nation are not avoidable things. The imagination of a country is not an avoidable thing. And in a greeting back home, where we are mostly never seen, is a way of witnessing each other's innocence, a way of saying, I see your innocence. So it resonated with me as a Muslim woman in America because there's so much negativity associated with the scarf and, with being a Muslim, immediately extremism comes to mind and, terrorist attacks come to mind, 9/11 come to mind, fear is associated when you hear about Islam. So you're always assumed guilty by association. Right, when people see you and you come into a room, there's always this sense of fear, people looking at you and a little bit of in a suspicious way. So and I don't want to compare or can ever compare the struggle of that's my little call to prayer. I can never compare, and I don't want to compare the struggle that Black people are going through with my Muslim experience or the experience of the Muslim community. But there is a solidarity in marginalization, as I, heard it termed, called it before. And in this solidarity of marginalization, when you see another Muslim woman whom you don't know and you greet each other, it's like, I see you, I know you are innocent, I know you are in the same, you're facing the same struggles like me. And so greeting each other as strangers, as Muslims, is so important because you share that same struggle. So here, Black people greeting each other, I found particularly in that regard very important. I was connected to that experience and how important it is to make such a gesture, and how much delight it gives to him that somebody else knows that he is innocent and that he is not as people, presume about him. And so another thing that also gives me delight when stranger, there was once an incident. I came into a store and a woman complimented on my scarf, and I found it so beautiful. It really gave me so much delight, because there was someone who focused on the scarf, which is so heavily associated with negativity and negative traits, and lifted it up and said something beautiful about it, and said, "Oh, I love the color of your scarf. Oh, I love how you wrap it." And she was a stranger, but it was such a beautiful gesture, because she challenged this whole popular narrative that was out there about me and other Muslims, and particularly Muslim women who wear the scarf. So that's, I think, also powerful, that somebody, a stranger, makes a gesture focusing on one piece of you and lifting it up, and turning it around. I felt that was something that really resonated with me. And so this piece, I could see, how he was, conveying that feeling, and I think many Muslims can relate to that as well. So for me, that really stood out.
On that sort of theme of interconnectedness, of human interdependence and relation, I want to highlight and read aloud from essay number 60, which can be found if you've got your book at home on page 162. And its title is "Joy is Such a Human Madness, the Duff Between Us." Or like this, in healthy forests, which we might imagine to exist mostly above ground and be wrong in our imagining, given as the bulk of the tree, the roots are reaching through the earth below, there exists a constant communication between those roots and mycelium, where often the ill or weak or stressed are supported by the strong and surplused. By which I mean a tree over there needs nitrogen, and a tree nearby has extra. So the hyphae, so close to hyphen, the handshake of the punctuation world, the fungal ambulances ferry it over constantly. This tree to that to this, and that in a tablespoon of rich fungal duff. A delight, the phrase fungal duff, meaning a healthy forest soil, swirling with the living, the dead. Are miles and miles of hyphae, handshakes, who get a little sugar for their work. The pronoun who turned the mushrooms into people. Yes, it did. Evolved the people into mushrooms. Because in trying to articulate what perhaps joy is, it has occurred to me that among other things, the trees and the mushrooms have shown me this. Joy is the mostly invisible, the underground union between us, you and me, which is, among other things, the great fact of our life and the lives of everyone and thing that we love going away. If we sink a spoon into that fact, into the duff between us, we will find it teeming. It will look like all the books ever written. It will look like all the nerves in a body. We might call it sorrow, but we might call it a union, one that once we notice it, once we bring it into the light, might become flower and food. Might be joy. And this essay really struck me. So if you are not familiar with Ross Gay, he's a poet, and I feel like even the way he approaches prose is just so poetic, and how he sort of describes things and evokes these images. But this idea of fungal duff and interconnectedness really spoke to me. And there's this wonderful, again, delightful image we found on the internet to kind of go with this. And in preparation for tonight, I was kind of listening to a lot of his interviews, both with the Maryland Humanities Council and at various conferences over the last couple of years around this book. And one of the interviews, he says, that when he took on this project, he was really trying to play around with this question of what are the ways in which we make each other possible. like how do we actually secretly provide delights to other people? And so he was talking about, you know, the fact that he's standing on a street corner and somebody comes by in a car playing a fabulous song, and you know, that person doesn't necessarily know that that fabulous song is like making the day of somebody standing on the street corner, but there is a moment, right? There's that fungal duff, this idea that we're connected and can actually secretly surprise and delight one another in daily life. And that's an idea that gives me so much hope, particularly in a challenging season for our communities right now. And so that sort of sense of interconnectedness and interdependence is something that I kind of hold on to in sort of darker moments. I also wanted to share my own sort of recent finding out that people were connected that I didn't know were connected stories, as a sort of personal sharing. And so there's a person that I've known for many years, but not super closely, but she's been an important person in my life and has been a kind of a good mentor. And I happened to meet another person through other means. And when I was preparing to meet this gentleman, I like looked and I said, oh, they co-edit a series together. So I mentioned this to the person. I was just like, oh, I think we have some mutual friends when we said, and I was like, do you know blah, blah, blah. And the person looks at me and he goes, why, yes, she is my partner. And I had no idea that these two fabulous people were making a life together. And it brought me such joy. Like at first I was a little embarrassed that I was like, oh my gosh, I should have known that, but I didn't. And he was being very gracious and was just like, why would you know that? Of course you don't. But I was like, well, you're fabulous and she's fabulous. And the fact that you're building your life together just makes me very, very happy all the way around. And it was, again, an instance where the interconnectedness and interdependence of our lives, I think, kind of jumped out at me. And I don't know if I hadn't been thinking about Ross Gay, if I would have been as delighted with that as much as I would have probably been embarrassed by that. And so in that way, I really thank Gay for allowing me to see that as a moment of delight, as opposed to a moment of embarrassment. So. Well, we, in a very unusual turn of events, are slightly ahead of schedule, which maybe means that we can spend about, well, let's see, probably about a half an hour in breakout rooms. So that way we have chances to share and reflect with one another. So just some guidelines on small group discussion. We would love for everyone to introduce themselves. And I think because we've got a little extra time, we're going to say that we're going to come back as a full group, maybe at 8:15. So you have a couple minutes to share. I think we're a small enough group that the 2 minutes of sharing is maybe a little bit not generous enough. So I think we could take a couple extra minutes. But once everyone has shared, we would love it if there could be some sort of synthesis, if there could be some observation around the commonalities of what's happening in your small group. And I'm just going to read through in the orange box some of our guidelines for breakout rooms. We value everyone's voices, so please take space for yourself, but also make space for others. Speak from your own experiences and don't try to tell someone else's story. Listen to learn and not to respond. And remember that we all come from different identities and backgrounds, so please respect others' rights to have opinions and views that differ from your own. And in order to promote an open and honest exchange in the small group rooms, please respect confidentiality within the breakout room. So we're going to invite those of you who are here. I think some folks may have run away from the small group conversation. Those of you who are here to talk for about 20 minutes, and then we'll come back together. Welcome back. I may be biased, but I think my small group was particularly fabulous this evening. And so I'm hoping that you also had great experiences in your Zoom breakout rooms. We have reached this point in the evening where we're kind of doing group sharing. So if anyone feels called to talk about what happened in their Zoom room, or maybe just comment on the evening. I believe you can unmute yourself. Is that correct? Or if you also want to raise a hand, either a physical hand or a Zoom hand, you can do that as well, and we can help unmute you. But I'm going to kind of turn it over to the room.
In our room, we talked a lot about gratitude practices and other contemplative practices, um, like walking outside in nature and observing what nature has to show us. Centering prayer were some other of the practices. So I think we were inspired by Ross Gay's ability to look for things that were delightful, but also he didn't shy away from things that were hard that enabled him to look at human resilience. So
That's
we had a
great.
really good time in our discussion.
I wanted to say first that I really enjoyed our group. So thank you to Heather and Judy and Thomasina. Um, it was a very stimulating discussion, gave me a lot of things to think about. And I think we talked about commonalities, and one of the things that we came up with was that there's more than one way of looking at things, and the way that we're looking at something may not be at all the way somebody else is looking at it, and that we need to be respectful of that, and not to always assume that where we're coming from is the only way to come at something, that there may be other equally legitimate ways of looking at a situation or approaching an issue, and that we can learn from that if we take time to get out of our own way, so to speak, and listen to what other people have to say, that we can have a kind of aha moment and like, oh yeah, well, maybe I'm not as smart as I thought I was. And so there's a different way of looking at it.
But first of all, a shout out of gratitude and appreciation to Melissa, who was the person who got me involved in ICJS events. So thank you, Melissa. Here I am. and also in our small group, I found a wonderful consonance or similarity in what we were discussing, yet different enough that it wasn't just sort of same old, but fresh perspectives on the reasons for gratitude and the causes of delight.
One of the things that I think came up very strongly in our foursome was that we're so interconnected that often our joys came from instances that were very, very similar. So it was the delight of seeing grandchildren or a mother make a choice that was life-giving rather than life-taking away, or being with your own children or a group of people. And the joy was so evident in each person's voice and on each person's face when we discussed our joys together, and then obviously acknowledge the gratitude for the opportunity to experience those joys in the last week or so.
Well, I just want to express gratitude for you all making the time to be with us tonight, and to think about the search for delight and the practice, right? Developing these muscles and exercises, this discipline of seeking delight as a space for interreligious connection. That's what I hope you can kind of take away from this evening, that this is a place where you can talk to other religious people as well as folks who may not be religious or who may be spiritual, that this sort of act of paying attention, of kind of engaging in life in a more meaningful, close way, and seeking out moments of gratitude is something that a lot of people are doing. And I kind of want to encourage you all to, in your own lives and in relationships, to maybe bring this up as a point of conversation and a point of connection. And that perhaps the way that we're all interconnected, the fungal duff between us, that the joy might be catching, and particularly in this moment. So at ICJS, we're always striving to improve our programming and our offerings. And as even you saw at the beginning this evening, it was a new type of program for us. Your comments and input really impact what we do. So if you could fill out this survey, which I promise you takes less than 90 seconds to fill out, we would be very, very grateful for your input about the program this evening. So this is one of many public programs and courses that we're offering throughout the year as we work towards our mission to disarm religious bias and bigotry by building learning communities where religious difference is a powerful force for good. You can always get more information about our events and sign up for our email newsletter, which comes out monthly at ICJS.org. And I'm going to screen share here for just a quick second. Hopefully you can see that. We've got 2 upcoming events that I really wanted to highlight for both of you. The first is being taught by our colleague, Dr. Matt Taylor, about the roots and reality of U.S. Christian nationalism. This is a short course. It's going to be offered in the library at ICJS in person at 10 a.m. And we're also offering it at night via Zoom at 7 p.m. So if you feel like you want to be with other people and studying together masked and in our library, you are most welcome. But if you still feel comfortable doing it at home, that's a great option too. I'm also just so thrilled that our Mannequin Clark annual lecture is happening this Monday, December 6th at Goucher College, and that we are thrilled to welcome Dr. Susanna Heschel to ICJS. For those of you who may not know, she's the daughter of Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel and is currently faculty at Dartmouth and is just a wonderful colleague and friend. And the lecture that she's giving is entitled Recapturing the Prophetic Tradition, a Challenge for Interreligious Dialogue. And I'm just so excited to welcome Susanna to town. You can join us in person at Goucher College. But again, we're also going to be live streaming and recording the lecture as well. So we're trying to make sure all of our offerings are available in multiple formats. So please go to our website and sign up for those events if they seem like something that might be interesting to you. And also, I wanted to say that you can donate to ICJS. We are a 501c3 educational nonprofit, and we rely on community support. And I just want to thank you for your partnership, your contribution to building an interreligious society, and for taking time to find delight. So thank you so much for coming, and be well, and hope to see you soon. Take care.